Alright, I've seen a lot of hydrogen fuel cells on the internet, and for some reason everybody makes it seem more complicated than it is. I've been making them for years. These are pieces from an old one I broke down, so they're a little jagged now, but I am going to clean them up. I'm not going to use any big terms or big words. Here's the basic lowdown. Each plate will deduct 3 volts from your alternator. Most automotive alternators put out 14 to 16, some of them put out 18 volts when they're brand new. So you don't want to go that high. The more volts you drag out of your alternator, the hotter the wires are going to be, the hotter the plates are going to be, so the hotter the water is going to be. Now, I've laid it out on a piece of paper so you can see it. Negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. That's 5 plates. 3 volts apiece equals 15 volts. Most automotive alternators put out, like I said, 14 to 16, so that's right on the border of being good and bad. If your alternator is running bad, this could start to cause heat problems or destroy your alternator. So the way around this is to put neutral plates that are not connected to positives or negatives. It doesn't take away from the effectiveness, but it does take away from the amount of volts it uses. Now I have them underneath here. Neutral plates go directly in between every positive and negative. So in between positive and negative, you'd put a neutral. Each neutral will remove 1 volt from the total volts being used. Up top we have 5 plates. That equals 15 volts being used from your alternator. We're going to add 4, and 1 in each space. So you minus 4 volts from the 15 and you get 11 volts. If your alternator is only pushing 11 volts, your car's not going to start anyway because you need 12 volts to start it. Now I'm going to take these plates, I'm going to clean them up and cut them down to the right size, and then I'll get back to filming and show you how to put it together the right way without anything complicated. Okay, we are back. I've taken them, cleaned them up, because like I said, these were off of an old fuel cell. You can see all the negatives and positives. I re-notched to a little notch like that. And the neutrals I cut off into perfect squares. Some of them have holes, some don't. That's because they were off of an old one. It doesn't really matter. So now that's what they look like cleaned up. I'm going to move to the assembly process, and when I get them all in place with a clamp before I hook them together, I'll film it again and let you know how I got to where I'm at. Okay, I'm back. Now, I've got it in the clamp. I don't want you guys to get confused. These sticking up, I'm using as spacers. They're extra stainless steel plates I had laying around. But what I want you to see is this. Negative, negative, negative. And then I flip the positives. So you'll see negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. And in between are all of the neutrals in between the negatives and positive. There's another view. But before I connect them and pull the spacers out, I just wanted to show you how I have it in the clamp. Okay. Now the ones sticking up, like I said, these are going to get yanked out after it's connected, but metal works better to hold them in place because it doesn't give at all. And these plates are about the right width apart for the spacing. So there you have from the top, negatives and positives with the neutrals in between. And I cut that notch, and now you can see why. You just flip the negatives and positives so they don't touch each other. And I'll move on to the next step by attaching them all and then pulling the spacers out of the way. And I'll show you how that looks as soon as I get them together. I'll explain how I got them together and yank them out. And I'm not going to be drilling holes in them. A lot of people drill holes and use nylon bolts, but if you've ever drilled through stainless steel, you better know how to sharpen a bit, because every single plate will dull a brand new bit all the way down to dull. From new to dull, one plate. So it's not really worth it. Okay, now, the last time you saw it had wood clamps on it, holding it in place. I have now welded the negatives and positive to 2 tabs. which I found is the easiest thing to do because drilling through stainless steel is really hard, and you don't need to make it hard. There's actually an easier way to this, and I'll show that in my next video, but this is a pretty stable and cheap way to do it. Now, what I forgot to show you in the last video is the 3 negative tabs. Close, you can see I tapped them backwards away. Back from the neutrals and the negatives. I tapped them back so I can weld a little tab across it. And in the back, what you'll see is you can see the 3 of them stick back further, welded both sides, and I reached over and welded the middle one on top and the bottom, which now that left the positive 2 sticking out enough where, let's see, where I could weld that side and I can weld that side because there's only 2 positive plates. So that makes my negative connection, which is here, the positive connection, which is here. 2 plates, 3 plates. The neutrals are still not connected to anything, which is why the spacers are here, otherwise the neutral plates would fall right out. And I think that's about it until the next step. I'm going to connect all the plates using, I'm not sure which way I'm going to decide yet, but either way I'll film what I do, so that way I can remove these spacers out of the way without creating a electrical charge in between them. Okay, so I'll come back when I figure out which way I'm going to use. Okay, so I've decided, since I'm making it as cheap as possible, I'm going to use a 50-50 resin. The hardener's on the outside, the resin's on the inside. You can get this at any automotive store, Home Depot, Lowe's. It dries in like 5 minutes, so I'm going to mix it up because I can't hold the camera at the same time. And this is only to hold the plates together so the neutral plates don't move, because all the other plates are already welded. So this is going to hold the neutrals from moving around and closing the spaces up. Also, this does not conduct electricity. I checked it with an ohms meter. You don't want to use any material that's going to conduct electricity because it'll cause a direct short and nothing will work properly. So I'm going to mix them up, and then I'm going to show you how to just a small amount, just the spacers basically, to keep the neutrals from moving around. Then I can yank these spacers up here out because they don't belong there. Okay. Now, I've taken the resin. As you can see when you first get it, I broke this off. Usually I cut it. There's a hardener and a resin. It's like a brownish color and then a silver color. When you mix them together, it looks more brown. That way you know that it's fully mixed. You keep mixing it up like you're kneading dough until you don't see any of the silver color left. That means it's fully mixed. I made 2 triangle shapes for the base because they're going to work as holding the neutrals in place, but they're also going to work to stabilize it. When this resin dries, it actually dries hard as steel, as the stainless steel itself. You could actually use this, a lot of mechanics use it on metal. If there's a crack, they'll put this on, and when it dries, you could actually sand this and grind it and paint it. So it dries as hard as steel, which is why I ohms tested it to make sure there's no metal actually in it. I made these 2 small pieces that I'm going to put on top to hold the neutrals in place. So before they harden, because it only takes about 5 minutes to harden, I'm going to try to do this while I'm on the phone. And like I said, this isn't going to be one of those beautiful looking hydrogen fuel cells, but they're easy to make too. I just want to make a simple one that actually functional and makes hydrogen for now. I can show you how to make a real beautiful expensive one in another video, but for now I just want to show you the bare bones of how easy it is to make it. Now these plates I've had, and I don't remember what gauge they are, and I don't care what gauge they are. They're about 3/16 of an inch thick, maybe almost, yeah, probably about that, or an 1/8. But I had them on an old 11 cell fuel cell, so
I don't mind taking it apart because I've done bigger ones now in my car. Let's switch to this side. And you just want to make sure it's not just on top. You want to make sure you get it squeezed down in between the plates, because you want not just the neutrals to move, but you don't want the positives or negatives to move around and touch any of the other plates. So while the spacers are still in, this is a good time to get everything jammed in where you want it. This is so hard one-handed. But like I said at the beginning, drilling through this stuff, it can be done, but you have to know how to sharpen a bit because it kills your bits. Even if you have a bit designed for drilling through this. I just want to show you. I'm trying to push it, not just on top, but so that it goes down in every space. And like I said, this isn't really holding anything in place because the positives are all the way welded on the outside, so they're holding it in as a unit, so it can't escape. I mean, it's not going to leave this spot because all three neutrals are welded all the way around to hold it like a perfect little box. But, and the positives are welded as well on this end, but not this end. So the positives that are in here and the negatives, or the neutrals, I'm sorry, can move around still, and you don't want that. So I keep working this down in. Starting to harden this. The other side went right in. Okay, so I've got it on top of the little triangles, and just to make sure it's down in, I'm going to use my linesmans and tap on top of the resin. Let me switch hands. Tap on this one. That should help set the resin in on top and bottom on the triangle. Okay, and like I said, this hardens like steel when it's finished, so now after this hardens, it'll turn silver. It won't look brown anymore. And when that happens, I'm going to start filming again, and I'm going to pull all these spacers out so you can finally see what it looks like. Now, the resin dried. I painted them with a little bright translucent green so you could basically see what I was doing, because I noticed in the video it was kind of hard to see with the resin being so dark. There's the picture with the light. You can see the triangle shaped bases I was making. It does make it stable, but they also are up inside to hold the plates. I just want to show you. You see how I shoved them? You can see the resin down inside the plates to hold them from moving at all. And it hardens like steel, like I said. Now the spacers are, I always want to show you. You can see right through the plates. All I have to do now, it's actually ready. You can put it in water and test it, which I'm going to do as soon as I finish this. Like I said, positive, negative, these are not cleaned up or anything. I've got to the point now where, before I even test it in water, well, maybe I'll test it first. Now you got to do something with these, negative and positive. Yeah, because this has to be in a container, sealed so it doesn't leak. And these have to stick out and go to a negative, positive toggle switch, a fuse, which I'm gonna film. But so now these have to get shaped, cleaned up, weld a bolt onto them, or just take them out and basically just stick them out of a bucket if you want to be cheap about it. Put a slice in the lid, slide them up through, and put a clip on them and hook them to the battery if you want to try to go bare bones with it, which is nothing wrong with that. If you want to unhook it to fill it, then you just take 2 clips off and pull it right out, which sometimes less is more, you know. You go through all the trouble drilling holes and nuts and bolts and hook it up permanently, and something happens, you have to reverse it. So, okay, I am going to test it today, so I'm going to put it in a bucket of water, and I'm going to hook it to a negative and positive to show you basically how much this will put out before I go building a container or finding a container, because I want to try to keep it as small as possible, because if you look under the hood of your car, you'll find out there's not a lot of room for anything really, so you can see down through them now. So you got to try to keep them as small as possible, unless you have a car with a lot of room. The one I have in my car is 21 plates, but I have it in my trunk, and I ran the hydrogen lines under the car to the motor. But that's a whole nother thing. This is a nice small tight one. You can hide it in any car you want pretty much. Okay, I am going to head out to the shed and try to film this, make it some hydrogen. Okay, so I'm ready to test it out. You've seen how we got up to this point. You know that the outside plates are negatives, the 2 center plates are positives, and 4 neutral plates. So this is a 9-plate hydrogen fuel cell, and I pretty much built it for free with stuff I had. I did have to buy 1 stainless steel welding rod. They're about $1 a piece. I used about 1/4 of it really. And it's not the prettiest cell, but I want to show you how cheap you can do this. I had the epoxy laying around. But anyway, I just want to test it before I build a case for it. This is an old fish tank that the kids holds water. That's all I need. Regular drinking water, nothing fancy. Electrolyte, which is baking soda. You should only need 1 teaspoon. Depending on the size of your fuel cell, you'll want to adjust the amount of baking soda. Or whatever you're using for electrolyte. Baking soda works fine. If you don't have any electrolytes in the water, which I've seen people do tests online and they try to debunk the hydrogen fuel cell, it's not going to make any hydrogen. You're wasting your time. If you put too much in, it starts making a foam, which is really ugly looking. Okay, so there's the battery, jumper cables. These are my old junky ones, so I don't care if they get in the water. Now, negative. Well, these are old, they won't even move. Okay, and then positive goes on the 2-prong, and we should see some fuels, hydrogen. Let's see what happens. There it is. Now, let's look down in it. There's the hydrogen right there being created. I don't know if you can see it with the sun in the wrong spot behind me. It's coming out the top like soda. There it is, bubbling. 9-plate fuel cell, built for practically about $10 worth of just stuff you'd have to buy if you didn't have the plates. Alright, now unhook the positive. You can see how much hydrogen that's making. Watch when I stop. And it's going to calm right back down. And there you have it. There it is. Nothing fancy at all. Okay, so I just wanted to show you the new Tupperware I found. And I found extension cord wire. Since you're dealing with 12 volts, you're better off using 12 gauge wire, not 14. But if you're going to put a 20 amp fuse, which I'm gonna, you're definitely better off using 12 gauge extension cord. See how floppy that is? You could run this through your car without it being stiff. I would never trust a Tupperware type lid, but I filled this with water, flipped it upside down, and left it on the counter all night. It didn't leak 1 drop, so that is fantastic. So that is going to be my container. Here's what I bought for the original plexiglass idea. The old PVC style. The reason I bought these is this. This one's male. This one's female. Wish I had 2 hands. And these thread together. So what you would do is put this inside after the hole is drilled. And if you look, there's actually a rubber gasket to watertight it. Drill a hole only as big as these threads. This will slide down through the hole real tight, right? Now, this, you cut a little rubber gasket to go on here out of an old inner tube, if you can find a rubber gasket. So right here is waterproof. That'll stay up tight against here, and you screw this down in, and there it is. You've got a watertight hole, a 1/2 inch. That's way plenty big enough to get the hydrogen out. So now you got to run a pipe from here, basically just from here to wherever your air intake goes.
What?